People who grew up before cell phones. What did you used to look at? Story 1. At home we would watch TV, listen to music, and read. It was much more common to carry a newspaper or a book with you. Like you would never go on a journey without one of these two things. Many of us also carried a Walkman to play tapes or CDs. There was a great device a few years before the iPod MP3 player came out called a mini disc player, and it was the best personal music player ever. One thing I miss about the olden days is how new music coming out was more of an event. Like we would buy a new album and go to a friend's and just listen to the album together. We'd look forward to the video playing on the TV because we couldn't just watch it whenever we felt like it. Answer: I would wait for over an hour until the new song would play again on the radio, just so I could record it on cassette and be able to play it whenever I want. If I didn't hit record at the beginning, or if the DJ talked over the music, I'd have to wait another hour before I had another opportunity to record. If there was one thing that the 80s and 90s taught me, it was patience. Story 2. Books and magazines. And don't let people pretend it was highbrow or more sophisticated. Magazines were filled with short fluff filler material. Answer: there were basically whole genres of books that only existed in bathrooms. Collections of short articles and facts that you could read in 5-minute chunks. Guinness Book of World Records, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Uncle John's Bathroom Reader. Short stories, poems, jokes, etc. In the 90s, almost every bathroom, especially guest bathrooms, would have a couple of these set on the back of a toilet. Story 3. Put down your phone for an hour and see for yourself. Stop thinking it purely a thing of the past. Just do it. Answer: every few weeks I get so bored of social media. Literally every post is just on repeat at this point, that I do exactly that. I grew up without electronics, so it's easier for me to slip into that state. But there is a small period of uncomfortable adjustment. I can see how people, especially kids, who don't know what comes after that discomfort, would just assume that that's all there is, without a screen in front of you. Story 4. As a kid, I used to read absolutely everything I could get my hands on, especially when I was bored. If I didn't bring a book with me, sometimes that meant reading the ingredients on the back of a ketchup bottle. I don't even like ketchup. I just needed to read something. Answer: yep, the cereal box while eating breakfast, the Kleenex box while pooping. I still remember Kleenex had a whole series on black women who made a difference in our world. That's where I first learned about Harriet Tubman. We took magazines into the bathroom with us. Or newspapers. Newspapers. When it arrived at the house, we all claimed the section we wanted first. Obituaries, sports, life, the crossword puzzle. We'd lay in bed and read before we went to sleep. We'd share the books after we read them. I can still remember a brown paper grocery bag full of books being passed from home to home. We went to the library every week. We'd also be outside playing all the time. We made up our own games and we'd play ball, always too close to the house, according to Dad. Story 5. Trees, clouds, and actual faces instead of screens. Sometimes boredom was just staring into the wild unknown. We had to use our imagination, not just Google, to eliminate time. Answer: baking. Exploring the general suburb through things like that old abandoned place and the empty sewer lines. Deliberately getting lost to test my sense of direction. I have an outstanding sense of direction. Though, I'm a teenager currently, so I do spend a decent amount of time on my phone. I just also like getting lost in my thoughts because that's when all my ideas happen. Story 6. People won't admit it. They watched a shoot load of TV, but television programs didn't run on demand, and everyone had a thing. News, sports, dramas, movies, late-night infomercials for sleep, Crime Stoppers, game shows, cartoons, Animal Planet, Discovery, music, etc. You knew what all your friends and family liked watching, and often would meet up to watch things you liked in common, or left someone alone to watch their show. Then this thing called reality TV, social media, and smartphones came out, and everyone's attention span and perception of success got obliterated. Yes, there was more time to be outside. There was less reasons to be distracted while being outside, but TV dominated. Story 7. I observed the world more. People watched while in public. At the kitchen table, I'd read the food packaging. In the bathroom, I'd read whatever product was around, like toilet paper packaging, or just had introspective moments about the day I had or interactions with others. Story 8. I remember the shampoo bottle phase well, but honestly, a lot of time was just spent daydreaming and staring out the car window. It's wild how much your own brain can entertain you when there's no other option. Story 9. There was a lot more local media then. You would have 2 or 3 local radio stations, a few different local, provincial, or national newspapers, taking the bus downtown and going to each of the 3 or 4 magazine stores, and literally standing in the aisles for hours, reading magazines about music, or art, or history, standing there in the store and only buying the best of the 17 or so you looked at to take home. Then you'd go to the several different music stores and experience the new music albums that have come out, the music of which you heard the singles on the radio, but actually handling the albums, looking at the art, etc., was an experience. Then in the evening, you'd often meet up with friends at a local coffee shop or cafe and sit there for hours with each other, sharing food and talking about nearly everything. On Friday and Saturday nights, often your whole friend group would go to the dance clubs and drink in safety and dance until 2 a.m. before taking the last bus home. If you were at home alone, you often were just laying there on your bed listening to the radio or your music albums, whether they were LP or CD. You took frequent trips to the kitchen to see if anything had changed in the last 30 minutes since the last time you thought you were hungry. You read encyclopedias, you drew pictures, you took your old toys apart and put them back together. You read magazines, not often newspapers, those were for adults. A lot of time was spent hovering over your ghetto blaster waiting for the DJ to shut the hell up so you could record the majority of a song to make a mixtape. Like a lot of time doing this. There was also a hell of a lot of just groups of 3 or 4 hanging out in each other's basements, just existing, watching much music, smoking substances sometimes, taking mushrooms or LSD occasionally, gossiping. We were often, too, writing short letters to each other that we passed back and forth at school. Much like texting today, you'd write the letters, fold them in the way your friend group folded them, and then slip them in lockers or to each other as you walked. There was a lot to do, but there was also a lot of time between those things to do. You must also remember that we weren't as closely watched and controlled by our parents, so being gone all day was not a problem. Or all of a sudden going out at 11 p.m. was questioned, but often permitted to go to a bush party or to hang out at the store, etc. Watch the film Dazed and Confused. Yes, it is about the 1970s, but it wasn't hugely different in the 90s for youth than in that film except different fashion, and we had portable tape players and smaller headphones. Answer: don't forget the neighborhood games outside like Red Rover, Cops and Robbers, Hide and Seek, Kick the Can, and various pranks as we got older. There was a heavier participation in after-school activities too, like all the band practices, jazz, pep, marching, etc., sports, track, basketball, volleyball, etc., shop, wood, mechanical, etc., clubs, 4-H, FHA, FFA, drama, debate, math, choir. And there was no texting, imaging, email, so you had to physically attend the meetings or get the handwritten notes from somebody. Oh, on top of all that, the godforsaken fundraisers so the groups could afford to go on field trips, regional competitions. I dreaded shirk those with impunity. Note, I think many of these still exist, at least in larger cities, but I would argue that participation now, compared to then, would be minuscule. Story 10. TV, books, album covers while we listen to the album, movies, clouds, landscapes, the road beneath my feet while riding my bike, art, streakers, the path between my horse's ears, whatever is passing by outside the window while driving by in a car, and the moon. Story 11. While eating cereal, we read the cereal box. While driving, we looked at the road. When at a doctor's office, we read the magazines provided. When with friends, we hung out in the moment and engaged with others. While popping, we read shampoo bottles. While stand in line, we read the menu board or just enjoyed people watching. Simpler times. A lot of us also had magazine subscriptions for traveling. Simpler times. Story 12. My dad said we weren't allowed to be bored when I was a kid. So if we couldn't come up with something to do, he'd hand us the dictionary or encyclopedias, or send us to the bookshelf in the basement, or tell us to dig a hole to China. After I worked my way through Webster's, the Encyclopedia, the Hardy Boys, Louis L'Amour, Zane Grey, and the rest of the bookshelf, and it already hit bedrock a few places in the garden. He taught me how to ride a bike and got me a library card. Ended up tackling the Three Musketeers with the help of a French-English dictionary when I was like 10. His philosophy when being asked if we could read something was to ask if we actually physically could read it. If that was a yes, then it was allowed, and we were always welcome to ask him about something we read. The only time I got really upset with him for not imparting the knowledge I sought upon me was my first read, at 13, of the Monkey Wrench Gang. I really wanted to learn to make thermite, but Dad said no, it would have to wait until I got older. Story 13. I'd walk through the woods near my house to the railroad tracks, put pennies on them, and wait for trains to smush them. I drew pictures and wrote stories. Also, there was internet on the computer that I could only use if no one was using the phone, the landline. I hung out in a lot of kids-only chat rooms that were probably full of pedos. Story 14. Lots and lots of magazines. I think at one point in the late 90s, early 2000s, I had a subscriptions to like 6 gaming magazines. Maxim, Stuff, Car and Driver, Import Tuner, Motor Trend, various other car magazines, Guns and Ammo, other various magazines full of cool guns, knives and survival and camping gear, National Geographic, and I'm sure a couple of others. I'd always find those deals that let you sign up to like 6 to 12 magazines at a time for a massive discount compared to buying them in stores. I'm pretty sure one time I dropped like 120 up front and ended up with like 12 magazine subscriptions for like 2 years. I know you might think that's wild, as yeah, the internet existed. But with the early days of the internet, you really only started to barely find a lot of the same information and articles online. Plus, you had to be logged in on a computer to read them, and most households were still one PC houses. Heck, our bathroom had a dedicated magazines rack in it for something to read while you did your business. Basically the same thing a lot of people do now with their smartphones. Story 15. When in a car, I'd look out the window and imagine little man running along while we drove. I'd read books, comics, magazines, whatever. Spend time staring out the window and daydreaming, or looking at the patterns on the rugs we had. Story 16. In what context? At home we watched TV or read or actually looked at each other. In the car or train, we looked out the window. At a doctor's appointment or any kind of appointment, we read magazines or stared at the posters on the wall. We also did a lot of people watching back then. Story 17. Well, as a 90s kid with less phones at home and none to the children, I always used to either watch TV, read our regional comics, which is not your usual comic but a mix of various stories, puzzles, and facts trivia. Also, apart from that, my grandparents make me read some books like biographies and our holy books so that I can learn about others. Story 18. Stuff. Taking Avcrap Bibki earned that a lot of shampoo had this stuff called jojoba in it. I still have no clue what that is. Story 19. I used to love to people watch LOL. Just go to the mall or park and sit at a bench and just watch people and their interactions. It's pretty interesting. I still do it, TBH. Besides that, there were concerts and movie theaters and car shows, street fairs, swap meets, bowling alleys and billiards, bars and nightclubs. When we were kids, we played board games, rode bikes, scooters, skateboards, go-karts, ATV, squads. We would draw and color, read, jump rope, and play basketball or kickball. We would go cruising as teens and try not to die. I grew up in a violent time in a border town. Lastly, we lived in the moment. Instead of trying to catch something significant on our phones, we would actually experience what was happening around us. We didn't worry about going viral or someone filming something we did. Thankfully, there weren't cell phones with cameras everywhere in the 90s. If there were, we would still be paying for all the dumb and crazy shoot we did. Story 20. They used to put toys in cereal boxes. We'd spend the morning fighting over who would rummage through the cornflakes to find it. I also used to crochet and paint, still do. Story 21. In my free time, comics and books. At breakfast, the cereal box. In the bathroom, shampoo bottles or just more comics. It is worth noting, though, that video games were around for a long time before smartphones were a thing, so you could just play video games. Story 22. Nature picture pages, Alf Books Barbies, Gem and the Holograms, Hidden Ink activity books, the wind hitting our faces, riding our bikes with no helmet on down the sidewalk Viewmasters, National Geographic Kids, Teen Magazine, Bop It, board games, Legends of the Hidden Temple. We looked at whatever we were doing, playing outside until the sun goes down. We put on shows and played school. Dodgeball and Foursquare were the go-tos during and after school. We listened to music and took dance classes. It was a different time. Story 23. I used to live on the edge and actually hang out with my friends and do things. When I was alone, I would read a book or watch TV, ride a bike, take a walk. Really radical solutions. Story 24. Books, magazines, the back of cereal boxes. Most of the time we were outside playing as kids, unsupervised by any adults for hours. Story 25. People, trees, clouds, TV, computer, magazine, where I'm walking, books, clothes racks and shelves, the road car in front of me, PowerPoint presentation or overhead projector, flyers on telephone poles, bulletin boards, catalogs, trading cards, Game Boy. Story 26. If I was really bored, there was always a set of encyclopedias I could read through. But fudge that. I'm going outside, climb a tree, build a snow fort, play fetch with the dog, play golf until the ranger chases me away. Story 27. As a kid, we played with friends, board games, played outside, sports, in the woods, just wander around, whatever. Read books, listened to music, radio, tapes, records, and only watched a little bit of TV. Cell phones started taking off in the 90s and were only used for calls and eventually texts. You had limited minutes and messages, so you rationed how much you used it. You didn't really use them for entertainment or other uses. It wasn't until smartphones came out that things really changed. Story 28. Magazines. I love to subscribe to my favorites, and it was such a thrill when a new issue was in the mailbox. So many of my favorite recipes that I have saved today are ripped out from a magazine. Even a doctor's appointment was exciting to see what magazines they had that you could comb through until your appointment. Story 29. Life clouds, critters, books, wood or art projects, kid relatives or your own. Board games, magazines, newspapers, friends, or nothing. Nothing was a great time to just think. I solved so many issues or made peace by just staring at nothing and thinking about it. Story 30. I'm convinced I can pronounce complicated words due to the amount of ingredient lists I read on the back of any and everything growing up. Story 31. The world around me. I noticed more things. I learned how things worked because I looked around. I watched the world go by. I noticed how actual people talk to each other. I looked at people's faces. I learned social cues. I learned body language. I also read the back of shampoo bottles and cans of air freshener. I read album liner notes. I read ingredients lists. I looked through the encyclopedia and turned to a random page just to see what it said. I read the fine print. Story 32. We sat around a table and read newspapers. We had conversations with people who didn't think like us. When people made insane claims about things, we would look at them like they just said something crazy. Story 33. The floor. We had these things called imaginations, or sometimes I just zone out. That came out more condescending than I intended. Story 34. We still had game stations like SNES, computers, Atari, etc. But we watched a lot of TV, played outside a lot, hunted for bugs or special rocks, rode bikes, roller skated, scooted, read lots of books, went on adventures with the neighborhood kids. Story 35. You mean smart phones? My first cell phones were only good for making calls. I used to read books, comics, magazines, newspapers. Kinda miss that. Story 36. If you were waiting for someone or just bored, you'd end up staring at literally anything. The ceiling, cracks in the sidewalk, people walking by, trees, your own hands. We'd read cereal boxes at breakfast like they were novels. At the doctor's office, you'd read a 3-year-old highlights magazine cover to cover, twice. Story 37. When I grew up, there were already cell phones, but I only got a smartphone that could browse the internet properly at 19. Before that, I'd read the backs of random bottles in the bathroom, gaming, or other magazines, stare out of the window, listen to music, make up my own stories or think about things. I still prefer this to staring at the brain rot machine TBH, read books, etc. When going on vacation, we would usually get a magazine or something to read in the car, often in German so I understood like 10, and some books, Donald Duck collections. Later I bought a Nintendo DS Lite and would often play games on longer trips. The DS still works. Honestly, I'm trying more and more to get back to that time, and I wish we collectively do. The smartphone brought a lot of good, but wasting time on social media isn't one of them. I realize now how much it has ruined my attention span. All the instant dopamine has made it harder to really enjoy anything meaningful. We're constantly bombarded with information that rarely serves any other purpose than entertainment. Social media is setting unrealistic standards on how to look, live, enjoy our hobbies, spend our money, treat each other, etc. More specific communities like forums, Lemmy, and Reddit, to a degree, can be fine, but only in moderation IMO. Story 38. I used to look out the window a lot. I'd look at the moon, or the trains passing by. I'd listen to music on my headphones hooked up to my CD player radio so it didn't bother my family while drawing. I'd play video games with my friends. I'd go outside and wander around aimlessly with my friends. Go to the mall. I'd also read books, or draw or paint. Sometimes I'd burn candles and just stare at them while listening to music in the dark. Play with toys. Talk to my family. Call my friends up on the home phone. Usually to ask about homework or if they wanted to sleep over or go somewhere. Depends on the age, I guess. I remember life before cell phones, and honestly, it was better. Maybe if it stayed cell phones with T9, it would be okay still. But smartphones with good internet access and full keyboards has kind ruined us all. Social media is awful. Story 39. At home. TV at road trips. Either listening to Discman and looking out of window, or reading a book. Toilet. Whatever product there was. School. Drawing. Being outside. World. Friends. Story 40. Like? During what point? In the bathroom? Magazines or shampoo bottles or the wall? Other times are boredom. I daydreamed. Story 41. Ceiling textures, cereal box trivia, other people's faces on the bus, and the subtle art of finding shapes in wood grain. We were the original cloud watchers. Story 42. Uncle John's bathroom readers. LOL. Outside the toilet, there was a reason I carried a book everywhere. Story 43. We read books, magazines, and comic books. Publishers Clearinghouse sold all types of magazines, popular science, home and garden, anything you can think of. We watched 3 channels on TV, played games like Monopoly, checker, and chess. Back then, we had encyclopedias to look things up in, A to Z, but mostly, we played outdoors. We played cowboys and Indians. We climbed trees. We collected lightning bugs in a mason jar, and then we let them go. We slide down little hills on a sheet of cardboard. We rode our bicycles everywhere. Story 44. If I was in a room with marbled tiles, I would search out shapes, faces, and the patterns. Still do this to this day when the occasion merits. Story 45. Like where? In general, TV, comic books, magazines, action figures, my dad working on whatever car was in the carport at the time. Outside a lot more. The biggest thing I think was we listened to radio, CDs, tapes, records a lot more. Me and my buddy used to turn on Art Bell at night and just hang and chat and read comics. It was pretty awesome. Story 46. You kept a cool paperback like On the Road on you at all times to break out and look cool even if you weren't actually reading it. Or better yet, you took up smoking. Gotta look like you're involved with something. Story 47. Faxes. Used to have to carry fax machines around with us. We'd have these special rucksacks to put them in that had a crank on the side that we could turn to power them. Of course, you never knew when you were going to get a fax, so you'd be cranking these things all day. Story 48. I read voraciously, every and anything I could get my hands on, even the encyclopedia or a dictionary or other reference books. Story 49. We were okay with being bored. We didn't need to fill our vision with stimulus 24/7. We could just lay on the couch and exist. Story 50. Walkmans, Game Boy, CD players, although not technically before the first cell phone. They were around before cell phones became mainstream. Story 51. Without a doubt, magazines. The difference between my living room in 2000 and now is there used to be stacks of magazines everywhere. Scientific American, The Atlantic, The Economist, various cycling, photography, and art magazines. We usually had 2 or 3 subscriptions going at a time and would pursue the bees stand a couple of times a month. I had a USNet reader installed on my Palm Pilot around 2000. I could sync the day's articles and read them on the bus to and from work. Story 52. We had these things called thoughts, and we could be alone with them without having to distract ourselves by reading something. Story 53. Real people, books, nature, cereal boxes, the big bathroom reader books that sometimes were in bathrooms, magazines, heck, even junk mail was interesting. Story 54. I think about this all the time. How different life was for everyone before we all had smartphones in our hands. You didn't really focus on looking at anything. You were always focused on the concept of experiencing things. You didn't look at your phone to watch a movie while you flipped through clips of OF whores bashing men. You sat down and put on a movie with the intention to watch it while doing nothing else. This also goes for all television. Maybe a TV might be playing while you look at or do something else, but if you intended to watch a TV show, that was your focus enough to turn off other electronics, shut off the lights, and maybe even unplug the phone as a guarantee to not be bothered. People stayed busier much more before smartphones. 90% of people found themselves to be extremely bored if they were just staring at a screen. It's not like what was on the screen wasn't extremely entertaining, but before smartphones, sitting down to stare at the screen in the middle of the day felt extremely boring and extremely unfulfilling. What makes looking at smartphones fun enough to do so without getting bored is the endless content to discover and devour, and the ability to communicate with others without the nuisance of speaking to them. Story 55. My bike handlebars, the branches of the tree I was climbing, the football I was playing with, the grass of the park we'd be running around in, the words of the books I'd read, the toys I'd play with, my friends' faces when talking to them, my friend's mom's chest when I was talking to her. Lots of things. Story 56. Wouldn't look at. At home I was playing with toys, watching TV, or later playing on PC. I spent a lot of time outside with other kids. Story 57. Just here to say get off your darn phones while you're driving. Y'all need to look out the windshield instead of at your phones. Story 58. We would ride bikes, watch TV, play video games or board games, do chores, eat, read a book, play musical instruments, etc. The best part was unexpected visits. People would just be in the area and stop by, knock on the door, and ask if the person they knew was home. Sometimes yes, and they would come in for a chat, just randomly. No plan, no warning. Just, I was running an errand over here and thought, I'd see if you had time to catch up. Or I would spend a couple hours going around to friends' houses to see if they could hang out. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But knocking doors and ringing doorbells was an activity that sometimes took hours. Story 59. Might come as a shocker, but we didn't need to have our brains or minds 100% distracted or filled at all times. Many times nothing was just fine. Story 60. Well, in the bathroom, my folks had Reader's Digest, and I subscribed to Sports Illustrated. My parents definitely kept the books coming. Watched TV at night for a couple hours and played with the dogs. Most daylight hours were between school and playing outside with friends. Story 61. I had a Game Boy, books, TV, and the outdoors, a Sega, then a PlayStation, and tons of fun toys. I grew up in a rural neighborhood with a lot of couples, so there were also many all-day games of hide-and-seek, etc. Wouldn't have traded it for the Depression rectangle if you paid me. I'm glad I grew up without constant internet access. I got to be a feral kid and just have fun, LOL. Story 62. What while taking a dump? I'd look at the backs of all the cleaning products. If my dad accidentally left his Playboy magazine in there, I'd look at that too, LOL. Story 63. Comics, TV, and a lot of books. I read a lot of books as a child. My school had a huge library that we can borrow 5 books at a time. Story 64. I miss being able to daydream. I used to be able to zone out and live entire fanciful lives in other worlds in my head, even pause them and return when I had another quiet moment. Nowadays, I struggle for weeks to think up the next bullet point for my D&D campaign. If there is one thing I miss from the 80s, it's my imagination. Story 65. Newspapers, especially the daily crossword puzzle and the Sudoku. Some papers had other word games. These puzzles were on actual paper, not projected on a screen. You had to use a pen to write on them, and they didn't have a hint function. If you couldn't figure out the solution, you had to wait until the next day for the entire solved puzzle to be published. Story 66. These responses are wild. I guess it's a good thing that the need to have something in front of your face isn't new and the fault of cell phones. Old lady here, born in the 60s. I was old when cell phones came out, got one in 1994 and still have that phone number. I didn't spend a long time in the bathroom. No need for distractions there. No reading of anything at the table. No television on during meals. Eat and be done with it. I always had books to read and often had magazines in the car just in case there was time to eliminate. Shrug. It was never a big deal. Story 67. There wasn't any time to look at things. We were outside riding bikes, making mud pies, learning to play instruments by ourselves for the hell of it, playing house, trying out the moon shoes we got at Christmas on spring grass, jumping on trampolines, playing cops and robbers, climbing hills and trees to see a better view of the city, playing hide and seek, building forts out of cardboard boxes, playing hockey and soccer in the middle of the dead-end street depending on the season. The only time we were inside was after sundown, 8-ish, and the only thing we looked at were ads for more outside toys while we ate Kraft mac and cheese and waited for our show to return. And you ask any of us, all we wanted to do was be grown up. I look back and I can't believe I wanted what I have now over that. Story 68. magazines, books, newspapers, encyclopedias, to name a few. That's why, even though I carry a device that has all of history and information about basically everything, I already nurtured my intelligence beforehand. That's what separates us from the generations which grew up with smartphones from the very start. I'm proud to have had my path. Story 69. Magazines, books, newspapers, television, stereos, and we actually called people on landline phones and talked. Story 70. The back of the cereal box, books, magazines, TV. We went outside. It wasn't the Stone Age's FFS. Story 71. Most of this half-dead gazing was replaced by actual activity. But on the morning buses and trains, everyone looked at newspapers instead. Those who didn't read books or looked out the window and daydreamed, or talked to each other. If you were out and about, you looked at your surroundings. I still cringe when I see too many people on their phones. It makes me put mine away. Story 72. Here is a stream of thoughts in no particular order. Read cereal boxes, made mixtapes off an AM radio, hockey, baseball, singles tennis against a building, biked to friends, bikes to other friends, played with fire, built tree forts from scrap 2x4s, made spook houses, kick the can, hide and seek, summer camps, day camps, road trips with comics, tried to build up the nerve to talk to a girl my age. Would not trade that in for anything. Story 73. Us fuckers used to carry a book at all times or newspaper. It was considered good form, after reading the newspaper, to leave it folded up nicely for the next person on the bus or train. Story 74. A lot of books and magazines at home. I read everything in the house. Then I started checking out books as often as possible. I bought magazines, Mad Magazine and Archie Comics, particularly. The teen magazines seemed silly and only had white girls in them, so I didn't bother with those. Highlights magazine, in the dentist and doctor's office. I cannot stress how integral those little articles and puzzles and whatever were. Cassette and album liner notes. I had producers and songwriters memorized. I'd look for them in other albums, see if I could trace the influences, the sound. Imagine what the lyrics meant. Marvel at how cool they were. TV when my parents allowed it, and movies, usually during summer camp or if something big came out, like E.T. or Gremlins, etc. The back of the cereal box. Story 75. Medicine leaflets, magazines, newspaper, comic books, guitar chord charts, and sitting outside after dinner, happily gazing at the stars. Story 76. Was outside most of the day. When not outside, I taught myself how to play guitar, took piano lessons, learned how to draw, learned how to sew, took horseback riding lessons, and ran track. Phones rob us of so much and make us sedentary. Story 77. I am 35 and we grew up rural. I read a lot of comic books. Garfield, Family Circus, Marmaduke, Hi Lois, Beetle Bailey, Richie Rich, Calvin and Hobbes, Far Side, old DC Marvel paperbacks. Story 78. You won't believe this. We had those things, huge things, so much huge you could carry one at a time, rarely more, and it depends on how strong your backpack was. They were called books, if I remember correctly. Yes, books. That's it. Then we had computers, big computers, fast, sometimes 8 megahertz, good times, bad times. Story 79. There was more printed stuff everywhere, magazines and newspapers mostly, but there was always something to read everywhere. Even music had liner notes and sometimes little booklets to read while you listened. Story 80. Magazines were very popular for a long time. I used to have subscriptions to a few and would buy the odd issue of others on a whim. Watched a lot of TV in my youth. Oh, we used to also read these things called books that were pretty neat, kind of like a world inside a paper box. Story 81. We stared at actual trees, ceilings, and other humans, sometimes even books, like it was the wildest thing ever. Story 82. Newspapers and magazines. I'd spy people in airports getting ready to throw them away and ask to take them. Wall Street Journal would be stacked at the hotel lobby for doom scrolling while traveling. Yes, I am a reuse is better than buy new guy. Story 83. Growing up, the TV was blaring every waking hour in our house. It still is in my mom's house. When I'm visiting her and she starts in on, everyone is glued to their phones. Nobody talks to each other. Kids don't do anything except play on their phones. I just look over at the blaring TV. I was, and still am, a reader. So now I love being about read books, news, whatever on my phone at any time. Story 84. The amount of kids that don't know how to play the playground games that used to be universal. They don't know how to play MASH or fold a fortune teller anymore. Story 85. Stupid warning labels. Like, don't use a hairdryer in the shower. Like, don't put the baby in the stroller while folded. We picked our heads up and looked straight ahead and to see how beautiful the world is. And the stupidity level was so much lower. Life was a blast back then. Story 86. The sky, books, bugs doing weird stuff, clouds, animals doing stuff, weird-looking people, the directions on shampoo and conditioner bottles, magazines, art projects, my own feet, etc. LOL. Story 87. What to look at wasn't a constant, driving, debilitating, compulsive itch to scratch. We fundamentally existed differently. It was what do I think about, do, read, make, learn, practice. Who do I go see, talk to, listen to? Our circle of diversion was simply farther than arm's length 99 of the time. The first world has fallen into a really gross addiction. There was a time before that. Story 88. We used to pass notes in class and make mailboxes out of paper and tape them to the side of our desks for our friends to drop them in while pretending to sharpen their pencil. LOL. Story 89. My dad's newspaper that was laying in the driveway every morning, with a big fat Sunday edition that people paid extra for, specifically the comics and the sports pages. Good times. Story 90. Mad Magazine, Calvin and Hobbes comic, any words on a box. Took apart a lot of stuff to see what was inside. Drawing. Watch TV in the morning and at night. You didn't want to waste the day. Newspaper comics, Meccano, build model cars and planes, listening to music and reading the liner notes on the album cassette and CD, sometimes homework. Story 91. We had the whole encyclopedia set, 6 kids in a 3-bedroom apt. We read those a lot. LOL. Oh, and when the Sears catalog came, we would pretend shop. Story 92. I used to read books and magazines a lot more. I was probably a bit more productive regarding cleaning and maintaining things. Story 93. The question is a funny one, like you literally have to have something to look at. I get it, but before phones, we didn't have to be looking at anything in our downtime. Story 94. As an old Gen X 1966 model and a HS teacher, this question really hit me hard. It's absolutely true. We used to zone out, and it's so common for us to criticize youth for doing so. I'm on my phone a lot, prob too much. So are most of my fellow teachers, young and old. So are my students. But hey, pick on the kids for it. Yes, we distracted ourselves. Many of the sources of our distraction are already listed on this thread. Cereal boxes, comic books, newspapers, handwritten notes, etc. Clinic and dentist offices, barber and beauty shops. Pretty much anywhere you had to hang out and do nothing. Magazines, train and bus stations, airports, even the city post office, newsstands that sold papers, books, magazines, etc. Then there were handheld games, even before electronics. I remember little plastic squares, 3x3 or 4x4, with one gap. You slid numbers around with your thumb until you got them all in order. Some of these were ABCs. Ever see the triangles at Cracker Barrel with the golf tees you move around and jump one another? That too. Don't believe any of the boomer mania that says we always engaged with one another and talked to one another. Kids these days. BS. We've always been distracted and in our own worlds. Electronics just gave us new ways to do that. Story 95. Cereal boxes, shampoo conditioner bottles, highlights magazines, play outside with friends and cousins. Story 96. Aside from television and the outside, books, newspapers, magazines, comics, etc. Cannot express how much of a thing magazines used to be. Story 97. I read a lot of books and magazines. I used to buy the tabloids for a laugh. Now they are on all my screens, and people think it is all true. Story 98. What's black, white, red, read all over? Answer below. P.S. It's not with a diaper rash. We had these big sheets of paper that got folded down to make them easy to carry. It had black-white pictures and lots of words typed on it about things happening in all your local towns and even around the world. There was a sports section too. It even had a listing of what shows were going to be on TV. Sometimes you even knew someone that had their photo on it. It was a huge thing if it was you or someone in your family, and you were treated like a celebrity at school, or a pariah if it was something bad. It had the first Reddit-like stories in it, and people would write in and ask for advice from Dear Abby, or maybe they had written in to her twin sister Ann Landers. The back of all these pages had a thing called classifieds, where people would sell stuff or write about their missing pets, and area businesses would have job opportunities listed. There was a new one printed up every single day, but Sundays were the best ones. The Sunday edition had an insert that was colorful comic strips, and the adults would fight the kids for it. Plus, there were flyers for all the area stores showing all the cool stuff you could buy that was on sale that week, and coupons you could cut out, and they'd give you discounts at the store. Whoever got to it first got to do the fun puzzles in it, completely ruining it for anyone else who also had wanted to do the fun puzzles and find the differences. We would use scissors to cut stuff out and put them in scrapbooks, or use the articles written for homework assignments, our reports for school. The area libraries kept old editions on special film that you'd have to practically beg to use, and the mean librarians would treat you like criminals who couldn't be trusted. If you were one of the lucky ones, a kid would ride up on an old beat-up bike and throw one at your house that was all rolled up with a rubber band around it. Sometimes it would end up on your roof or in the bushes or on your car, and some unlucky people even had it smashed through their front windows or got hit in the face with it. And that kid on the bike could be downright mean if you didn't leave them a couple dollars tip every once in a while. They'd blacklist you, and you'd get all ripped up wet from a puddle papers. Or maybe the Sundays was missing all the cool inserts, coupons, or even worse, if they were short, you'd get nothing at all. Answer: a newspaper. Story 99. The backs of cereal boxes and shampoo bottles. I think most Canadians' bilingualism involves translating these two items and their ingredients. Story 100. I read everything that came into the house, including my father's Teamsters magazine. I remember when Frank Fitzsimmons started writing the note from the president instead of Jimmy Hoffa. I also read my dad's Knights of Columbus magazine and my mom's Women's Day. I love going to my grandparents' house. They got Look and Life. Whenever we had a school project that involved cutting pictures from magazines, we'd had there plenty of material. Story 101. We read books, actual paper books. We saw our friends, in person, at parties or hanging out. We looked at nature, the sky, sunsets, birds. We experienced different things instead of watching others do it. Story 102. We had a small handheld Yahtzee game in the bathroom. Only my parents' bathroom, so that's where I always went. Ended up buying one as an adult and keep it in the bathroom for emergency phone forgetting. Story 103. Instead of doom scrolling while in the bathroom, you actually grabbed a bottle and learned about something. Sodium lauryl sulfate, sodium lauryl sulfate, formaldehyde, polyethylene glycols, and plethora of different fragrances. Story 104. We danced, had long phone conversations, read books, went to the park to see our friends, went to coffee shops to see our friends, and looked at each other in the eye. Story 105. Books. I would physically carry around a small stack of books with me, on the off chance I got bored. Story 106. I would read a lot. I still do. My dad cataloged his sci-fi and fantasy novels, and at one point he had over 1,000. I never had a shortage of reading material. If I didn't want to read fiction, I would read the legendarily hefty volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica my parents kept on an entire bookshelf in the living room. I learned so much, and this is probably why I'm such a nerd. I still can sometimes sit down and read Wikipedia for hours about subjects I know nothing about and have very little interest in. I guess I like filling my brain with stuff. Story 107. I would sift through the pages of my mom's encyclopedia set. If there wasn't anything scandalous, I would start over from A and start reading. Story 108. I guess we will never know if the dearth of original creativity in younger millennials and Gen Z is because of the permanent stimulation and influence of smartphones. Story 109. I listened to music, read books, hung out with friends' family, and actually being present, spent a lot of time outdoors looking at and enjoying all the beauty nature has to offer. Story 110. We read cereal boxes while we ate breakfast and shampoo bottles while going to the bathroom. FYI, you don't need to be looking at something all the time. It's actually really bad for you. Story 111. Back in the day, you could be on the internet all day and still be productive. You can click on a link, go to the kitchen to make a sandwich, come back in time for your page to be almost done loading on that 56K bits internet speed. Story 112. Clouds, TV, movies from Blockbuster Movie Gallery. Really anything we wanted to do as long as we were home before the streetlights came on. Story 113. We went outside and looked at nature, played in the woods, laid in the grass and watched the clouds. Story 114. Before I had a cell phone, I usually had a book with me and a Discman or later an MP3 player. I also had a Game Boy, so there was plenty to entertain me while I was traveling. At home, I watched TV, either what was being broadcast or something from our VHS DVD collection. I listened to music, and we had several different computers throughout my life, so I played lots of computer games when I was a kid. Microsoft Paint, The Sims, Minesweeper, etc. By the time I was in high school, we had internet access, so I'd play games online or go into chat rooms and talk with strangers. Story 115. We hung out with friends more, sat on the home phone for hours, looked up YouTube videos on the family computer, or played video games. We spent hours every day outside, walked to friends' houses just to see if they were home. We rode bikes, got dirty, played sports and hide and seek. We waited days to talk to friends or crushes because it was summer, or the weekend, or winter holidays, and there was no other way to communicate because Facebook wasn't big and MSN was only on our computer, which needed to be plugged in with an Ethernet cable. Too soon, Wi-Fi became more popular in homes, cell phones ceased to slide open and shut, and social media became our primary form of communication and entertainment. It was a lot better before we had unlimited access to screens. Story 116. Spent a lot of time listening to music, reading, doing outdoor things, enjoying friends. Darn, I miss those days. Story 117. Riding in the car, as a passenger, I just look out the window and think. I am an avid reader, but I've never been able to read in a moving vehicle without feeling sick, so I just watch the scenery go by. Story 118. Books, music, TV, movies, games. We drew, wrote, did some coding, went outside for walks, to fish, to play, etc. Socializing in person. Story 119. Technically, cell phones weren't a fully prominent thing for most people until like the early mid-2000s. Computers were still a thing, plus TV. Story 120. Literally spent my entire childhood playing outside, going camping and fishing. Spending the entire day at the lake with my siblings, sleeping on the trampoline with piles of blankets with my friends and sisters. We had a go-kart, used to ride that around till it fell apart. Had four-wheelers and dirt bikes, Pokemon on Game Boy Color, each sibling taking turns at beating bosses in Sly Cooper. Hide and seek, Nerf gun wars with my siblings and the neighborhood kids, snowball fights, running around the woods with my sisters, creating our own games, collecting rocks and sticks, endless stories. Story 121. We went out with friends. We met at the caf, or at a meeting place known to all. We imagined lots of things. We moved. We laughed. We flirted. We lived our lives. Story 122. I would sit on the sidewalk and look at nothing. I don't know, just existing. I would climb trees and look at things too, or comic books, or children's films. Story 123. I remember when my grandmother got a color TV. It was the first one in a large extended family. I didn't watch a lot of TV except on Saturday morning when cartoons were on. Story 124. I remember for those longer bathroom sessions, I would grab the TV guide. Beyond that, my butt was outside constantly. Story 125. Newspapers, magazines, cereal boxes, Land's End catalogs, CD liner notes, raindrops running down window panes. You know, the usual. Story 126. Raindrops racing down the window, leaves blowing in the wind, bugs, birds, the clock, the fan. We had so much more time in the day because we didn't have devices sucking hours away and stealing our life. Story 127. I had an AM/FM radio with a cassette tape before they were super common, so I was always trying to tape my favorite songs off the radio before the DJ would talk and mess it up. Radios were a lot bigger deal. We had stations and DJs we followed. And yes, I read a lot, like everything. Story 128. The real world typically outside. Or we read books, or made model airplanes, or learned to play an instrument, or occasionally watched a movie or show on TV, if our parents let us use the television. Story 129. As a kid in the 90s, I watched a lot of TV, played video games, and played with my toys. In the 2000s, when I was a teen, I did those same things, read books, and went on the desktop computer for a few hours in the evening. Story 130. Each other. We went outside a lot more. We read books and magazines. Mainly, though, we engaged in meaningful conversations more often. Story 131. It was TV. Everyone watched TV, and people would complain that everyone was watching too much TV. As a kid, it was being outside all the time, riding bikes and playing sports games with the other kids in the neighborhood. Story 132. Lots of reading, not just books and magazines, but cereal boxes, shampoo bottles, etc. Also, we were outside a lot. Story 133. Anything. Cereal boxes came with activities on the back. We'd read the actual newspaper and real books. And we watched TV. Sometimes we actually looked at the people we were with. Wild times. Story 134. Books and magazines mostly. I loved going to the beach with a new magazine, which I'd flip through and finish, then take my beach nap, which usually ended in a very bad sunburn. Story 135. Rode my bike, went swimming, watched movies at the cinema, learned how to write coded letters to an old boyfriend when I was in HS, Futhark runes. Oh, and then electricity was given to us. JK, sorry, my Gen X sarcasm kicked in. Story 136. I used to read the back of the cereal box, shampoos, cleaning products, etc. TV was on very often, and good books kept me hooked. Newspapers and magazines too. But I remember being totally bored in waiting rooms, and I'd start making stories in my head. Story 137. Nothing. When I was 5'10", I was outside after school and homework till dinner, and then again after dinner till dark every day. On Saturdays, we were outside after breakfast till lunch, then outside again till dinner. Unless we had sports, then that was a morning activity. Sundays were usually indoors spending time with family after church. TV wasn't even much of a thing till we got cable when I was in high school. Story 138. Magazines. I can't even begin to tell you how many magazine subscriptions my family had, or how exciting it was going to the grocery store and pick out a new magazine and a crisp soda. Story 139. We looked at the sky, our friends, the road we were biking down, storefront windows, black and white movies at the theater. Story 140. Which decade? Before cells, there was AOL on a desktop and cable TV. Before internet, there was still cable TV and VCRs. Before that, still cable, just less variety. And music, lots of music. Hours spent writing incorrect lyrics to my favorite songs. And there has always been books. I read everything. And phones. I spent hours talking with my friends on my kitchen wall phone. It had a 20-foot cord, so I could just see around the doorway and watch that cable TV in the living room. Wanna laugh? I, 57-year-old female, recently took my youngest, 15-year-old male, on a cruise. He picked up the phone in our room and put it to his ear, pulled it back to look at it and said, "It's broken. It's making some weird noise." I took it, listened, then started laughing so hard I had tears. It was the dial tone. Story 141. The world. Could be people watching, talking to people, riding bike, just going for a walk and seeing what was out there. Going to a concert, going to a movie, going to a mall. Lots of stuff to do. And it wasn't always watching, which is passive. It was interactive in person. It's great to have the net, YouTube, 1001 streaming services, but the communal smoke get outside water cooler breaks were better. Story 142. Wedgo, knock on the neighbor's door and ask if the kids could play. Literally every night and weekend we weren't busy. Also, we had TVs, we had computers, we had video games. Newspapers and magazines were read if not books. Story 143. Books. We talked to each other. We wrote notes and letters. We went outside and enjoyed the outdoors. Story 144. Thanks for the post, OP. It's crazy for me to think I would just go into my detached garage, take a fat bong hit, and listen to music on my headphones during college. No phone, just jungled NB while ripped, staring at a disused lawnmower. Story 145. Me personally, books, television, the outdoors, various arts and crafts, and occasionally video games. Story 146. Depends on where you were. In a car, at home, on a plane, waiting for your mom to pick you up at the mall. You had a comic book, a paperback, the newspaper, print media. If you were in the bathroom, you read the back of the shampoo bottle. Story 147. Counting flowers in the wall. That don't bother me at all. Playing solitaire till dawn with a deck of 51. Smoking cigarettes and watching Captain Kangaroo. Now don't tell me I've nothing to do. Story 148. Watched other people, talked to each other, TV, Playboys, video games. I was about 20 when I got my first phone, in about 2006. Story 149. The thing we were building or fixing, like a car engine, bike, treehouse, lawnmower, car stereo, etc., or raking leaves into a fire pit and sitting around the fire. If it was cold or wet, usually the TV. Story 150. We had these portable devices that didn't need batteries. They could be used wirelessly with many different sources of light. They're called books, and most communities still have special buildings called a library that will allow you to borrow one. Story 151. We were living our own lives, not looking at or watching others' lives in jealousy or envy. We weren't obsessed with what anyone else was doing. It didn't matter. We were too busy actually living and doing things, like playing, talking, building forts, riding bikes, swimming in ponds, fishing, hanging with our parents, grandparents, cousins, friends, and every single day was different, and it was a blast. Story 152. Read a lot, not even just books, but anything. Newspaper, random boxes, or bottles on shelves. Can't count how many shampoo bottles I've read. Went outside and played with our imagination or fire, LOL. Rode ATVs, dirt bikes, regular bikes, pogo sticks, scooters, skateboards, pretended sticks were guns to shoot each other with, or shoot other stuff with BB or real guns. We got in trouble as kids for the holes through the no passing zone sign by our houses after my dad got me a cool laser sight that he thought they'd put it on the BB gun. That wasn't true, but don't tell mom. And talk to people. You'd go and talk to your friends or your parents or even yourself. Conversation was important because you couldn't do it again until you saw them or if they had a house phone. But weirdly, I feel it was easier to get a hold of people then, just for the fact people would tell people where they were going or what they were doing. And it wasn't super common for people to ignore you, because they didn't always have that option to start and stop communicating whenever. Story 153. I talked for hours on the phone with my friends. I read much more than now. I listened to music and wrote letters, the diary, songs, and poetry. Story 154. Jigsaws, music, crosswords, and ringing friends. We all knew phone numbers from memory. Wasn't that hard. Wish I could go back to those days before internet. Story 155. We read magazines, Time, Life, People, Entertainment Weekly, etc. Anywhere you had to sit and wait had stacks of them. Story 156. Magazines, stacks of magazines. Went to grocery store and stood there looking at them all the time. Bought the best ones. Some magazines had CDs or discs for games, videos, programs too later on. Story 157. TV movies, album covers. Music was much more important then. X-rated magazines, I read a ton of books. Had tons of friends. Story 158. We worked on our shoot cars and trucks. Changed the parts. We would call our buddies on a landline to their houses and make a plan to meet up and not flake out. We got lucky and found some adult content mags from time to time. Story 159. As kids, we played rock, paper, scissors for who got the cereal box at the table. It used to have all kinds of little games on it. Story 160. All the different types of ants that crawled on the ground. Watching their behaviors and how they worked collectively. Story 161. I used to read books or go ride my